I'm Dana Shagru with CEAg World Greenhouse Produce, an innovative brand that engages with the rapidly expanding global greenhouse produce industry through a variety of platforms. Our mission is to educate and connect greenhouse produce growers and industry allies to help them better understand and sustainably advance the global food industry. On this episode of CEAg Talks, I'll be speaking with Carmen Azzaretti, Engineering and Operations Manager at Resource Innovation Institute. Carmen, welcome to CEAg Talks.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. I'm really excited to be here.
We're happy to have you. To begin, can you tell us a little bit about your role at RII?
Yeah, so my background is in mechanical engineering, and while RII brings together people from all sorts of different backgrounds and expertise, I mainly focus kind of on the data side of things, benchmarking, as well as on the energy, HVAC, kind of that like technology side of things.
Awesome. So to kind of dive into the Ag Census data and RII's report on CEA food trends from the Ag Census, I know you did a lot of work on that report. So can you tell us more about the role you did with that and what all the project entailed?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a report that I have been like chopping at the bit to write since we kind of kicked off one of our previous projects looking into kind of USDA data for the USDA. And ever since that, we did that kind of like mini version. It was a market characterization study. I have been like, we could do really awesome stuff with the data from this report. And we finally kind of had the bandwidth to do that, that kind of coincided with the most recent publication. So this is all, well, most of it is based on the Census of Agriculture. And then we have a little bit in there from the Census of Horticultural Specialties. And the Census of Agriculture comes from the USDA. And it surveys all the farms across the entire country, and it has everything in it. It has cattle, it has maple syrup, it has Christmas trees, it has mushrooms, it has everything in it, which is awesome. And then they also come out with some more targeted ones. There's also the irrigation and water census, which is really interesting for irrigation trends. And then the Census of Horticultural Specialties. And that one focuses more on kind of that like nitty gritty CEA side of things, as well as other specialty products. So this is the big census, and I was so excited to dig into it. Me and my coworker Bryce really dug into it, and like I was the champion of this report. This was my favorite thing that I did this entire year, and I'm so proud of it.
What are a few of the most notable CEA food trends that you came across while completing this report?
Yeah, so let's dig into some food, which is really exciting. And you know, with CEA, people want to talk about food because it also feels like the most, it's like we need to eat. Humans need to eat. Everything needs to eat. Like food is the most important aspect. We tend to forget floriculture, which actually makes up more square footage. And that's also in the report. So there's a bunch of information about floriculture as well. But food, I think, is just much nearer and dearer to people's hearts. So I have some national trends, and then I have some state level trends, and then there's also some just like crazy growth within certain slices of the industry. I could talk about this report all day long. So just like highest level, so this is national trends. And the categories that we have for food grown under protection, and we kind of slice and dice things. So we have food grown under protection includes technically vertical farms, although I would say that they're not very well represented in here. We're not really sure how much that's included. That being said, square footage wise and number of operations wise, they're pretty small. So I'm not really worried about that being a negative aspect of this data at this point. So we're talking greenhouse, technically vertical farms, and then also mushrooms are CEA. So mushrooms are food crops grown under protection. So this is the phrasing that is really important throughout all the USDA report, any of their reports, is under protection. Sometimes it's under glass or other protection, but I think they've kind of switched to doing mostly under protection. So this is number of operations, and there's two kind of like slices of data that's always available, and then there's like value of sales, which is cool, but not always available. And so there is number of operations, and then there is area. So those are kind of the slices you get. You don't necessarily get like pounds of total tomatoes in this report, although that could be in other reports. And I haven't quite found one that's like specifically under protection always. And that can be kind of the difficulty is you're looking at tomato data, but you can't always get that slice that's under protection separately. And with floriculture, it's especially hard because most floriculture operations, enough of them are mixed use that you can't actually get sales data about floriculture that excludes those like outdoor kind of operations. So it's kind of odd. Food operations under protection. So this is number of operations. Now, a lot of these operations probably sell multiple products here. So you have those other vegetables and herbs. Unfortunately, leafy greens is just looped into other here. So that kind of sucks for us. But in the horticultural specialty census that comes out, I think it's at the end of next year, it's like December planned. That one has more leafy greens information. But this is kind of like the big overall trends. This is the 2022. This is the only post-COVID census we have. It comes out every 5 years. So I think a lot of these trends are kind of coming out of the post-COVID. So this is the year of 2022. The data is all from that calendar year. So when we look at those like 10-year trends, like you can see here on the side, that is really the 2012, 2022. That's like the pre-COVID world to the post-COVID world that I think is really interesting. But yeah, some of these operations grow multiple crops. So I don't think you have a lot of operations that are growing mushrooms and fruits and berries, but I think you probably have a lot of operations that are growing some tomatoes, some maybe leafy greens or like fresh cut herbs or something like that, and then also some fruits and berries. So this is kind of a number of operations. And what we also see here is there's been a huge increase in fruits and berries. That might just mean people adding fruits and berries to their operation, as well as a slight increase in kind of the other and the tomatoes. And this is number of operations. So sometimes those operations can be this under the same business, but multiple locations. And sometimes those operations can be individual businesses. We don't necessarily know that. This is kind of that expansion there, which is pretty cool to see. So you have a lot of tomato operations. I would say so obviously the largest group here, that 47% of operations that are in CEA are growing tomatoes, which I think is pretty valuable. Other, not quite as valuable because it is such a large bucket there. It can include things like peppers as well. So peppers and cucumbers are other common CEA. Obviously, you know that. Big in that world. Other CEA crops kind of in there. But this is interesting. So you also have a pretty small amount of operations growing mushrooms. I could talk about the trends for mushrooms in this all day, but I don't know if that's necessarily our audience. But a huge expansion in growing mushrooms as well. And I think that if you're one of those people that hangs out at farmers markets or who likes to shop at the hippie dippy grocery stores, you've also been seeing an expansion in kind of those specialty mushroom offerings that are really interesting. Like most dried mushrooms typically come from abroad, and then most of your like button portobello mushrooms come from the Pennsylvania area. But I've been seeing a pretty significant expansion in like the oyster mushrooms and the lion's mane, like all that kind of stuff. So I really think you're seeing a pretty significant increase in those products being more interesting to people. And that's kind of where I think we're seeing that, because I don't think that those mushroom operations are also growing leafy greens next door for the most part. I think those mushroom operations are just their own operations. But you are seeing a pretty significant expansion of fruits and berries, which I think is interesting there.
Well, Carmen, thank you again for joining me on this episode of CEAg Talks. I really enjoyed taking a deeper dive into the CEA trends in the Census of Agriculture, and I look forward to what you continue to uncover in future projects.